Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside. This kind of deposit requires additional verification. She said it loudly, deliberately, the kind of volume that was not about procedure, and everyone in that bank lobby knew it. Marcus Hale stood at the teller window with his hands flat on the counter, visible, relaxed, the way his father had taught him to stand in rooms that were not yet sure what to do with him. He had placed a cashier's check on the marble surface. A single document, clean, folded once along its center crease. He had not raised his voice. He had not moved quickly. He had done nothing except exist in that lobby on a Tuesday morning in September, wearing a charcoal wool jacket that cost more than the teller's monthly rent. The teller's name tag read Deborah. She was already reaching for the phone. Around Marcus, the lobby of Meridian First Bank's Buckhead branch had gone the particular kind of quiet that happens when people decide, collectively, that they did not see what they just saw. A woman in a yellow coat looked down at her deposit slip. A man in a blue tie became very interested in his phone. The security guard near the door shifted his weight but did not move. Nobody said a word. Deborah spoke again, quieter now, with something harder underneath it. We have protocols for large sums from accounts we can't immediately verify. It's nothing personal. Marcus said nothing. He simply waited. What Deborah did not know, what none of them in that lobby understood, was who she had just asked to step aside. And when the truth came out, it did not just embarrass her. It ended things. Stay with this one to the end, because every detail here is placed for a reason. Let me take you back to the beginning. Let me show you who Marcus Hale really was, and how a man who had spent 30 years building something extraordinary in near total silence walked into that branch on a Tuesday morning and changed the course of several lives, including his own. Now, here is what most people did not know about Marcus Hale. He was 51 years old, and he had spent the better part of 3 decades making himself invisible by design. Not out of shame, not out of fear, but because his grandmother, Estelle Hale, had sat him down at her kitchen table in Macon, Georgia, when he was 14 years old and told him something he never forgot. She had pressed both hands flat on the table, the same gesture he would later use at bank counters, and looked at him with the gravity of a woman who had watched the world take things from people who announced themselves too early. "Stay low," she said, "build high, and let the work speak when you're ready for it to be heard." He had written those words in the inside cover of every journal he kept from that day forward. Marcus grew up in a 2-bedroom house on Felton Drive in Macon, the son of a postal worker and a school cafeteria manager. There was no inherited wealth, no family network of investors or mentors with corner offices. There was a public library 3 blocks away that Marcus walked to every Saturday morning from the age of 9, and a father who believed that compound interest was the closest thing to justice the financial system had ever accidentally produced. He graduated from Morehouse College in 1994 with a degree in finance and a loan balance that took him 6 years to retire. He did not go to Wall Street. He did not take the recruiter's offer from the Atlanta firm that came to campus his senior year, the one with the mahogany lobby and business cards that felt like small declarations of arrival. He took a job as a junior analyst at a regional credit union in southwest Atlanta, a place where the clients were small business owners and working families who needed someone to look at their numbers without condescension. He stayed there for 11 years. While his Morehouse classmates were collecting titles and corner offices, Marcus was collecting knowledge. He studied every loan structure that crossed his desk, read every regulatory filing the credit union submitted, took night courses in real estate law and tax code. He was not building a resume. He was building a foundation, the kind that does not show from the street. By 2005, he had begun acquiring property. Quietly, a duplex in East Point, a small commercial strip in College Park, a warehouse in an industrial corridor that everyone else considered too far from the center of things. He financed each purchase carefully, never overextended, always kept his debt-to-equity ratio at a number that would have made a conservative banker nod with approval. He did not talk about it. He did not post about it. He paid his taxes, reinvested his returns, and went back to work on Monday morning. He was building high, exactly as Estelle had told him. By the morning he walked into the Buckhead branch, Marcus Hale was the sole or majority owner of 43 properties across the metropolitan Atlanta area, with a combined assessed value that had crossed the $40 million threshold 2 years earlier. He held accounts at 4 financial institutions. The account at Meridian First was not his largest. It was not even his second largest. It was the account he had opened 17 years ago, when the branch was still a community bank called Cornerstone Savings, before Meridian First acquired it in 2019 and redecorated the lobby with brushed steel and ambient lighting that made everyone look slightly suspicious. The cashier's check he placed on Deborah's counter that Tuesday morning was for $840,000. It was the proceeds from the sale of a commercial property on Peachtree Industrial Boulevard, a building he had held for 11 years and sold to a logistics company that had been courting him for 2 of them. The check was drawn on a title company account. Legitimate in every particular, the kind of transaction that Meridian First processed fewer than a dozen times per year. Marcus had called ahead. He had spoken to a branch associate named Cynthia Reeves the previous Friday, confirmed the deposit procedure, confirmed that a cashier's check of that denomination would be accepted at the counter, and noted his account number. Cynthia had confirmed everything, professionally and thoroughly. He had the notes from that call in his jacket pocket. He did not reach for them yet. Now, here is what you need to understand about Deborah Forsyth. She had worked at the Buckhead branch for 3 years, promoted to senior teller 18 months ago. She was efficient, precise about procedure, and deeply certain about her ability to read a situation. She had a gift, she believed, for identifying what she privately called inconsistencies, moments where a person did not match the transaction they were presenting. She had flagged 7 deposits in the past 18 months for additional verification. 6 had cleared without incident. 1 had resulted in a hold on a check that later cleared. Her branch director had praised her instincts in her last performance review. Deborah has excellent situational awareness, the review had read. The word excellent was underlined. That branch director was Patricia Gould. Patricia had managed the Buckhead branch for 4 years. She was 44 years old, had an MBA from Emory, and ran her branch with the confidence of someone who had never been seriously wrong in a professional context, or at least had never been shown that she was. The branch consistently ranked in the top 5 of Meridian First's 42 Atlanta area locations for fee revenue and new account acquisition. Patricia was proud of this. She mentioned it in most conversations about the branch. She had a framed photograph on her desk of herself shaking hands with Meridian First's regional vice president at the previous year's performance banquet, positioned so it was visible to anyone sitting across from her. Patricia had not yet been called. But Deborah's hand was moving toward the phone. Marcus watched it travel. He did not lean forward. He did not shift his weight. He breathed the way Estelle had taught him to breathe in rooms that were testing him. Slowly, from the center, without any of the urgency the room was trying to install in him. "Is there a manager available?" he said. 7 words. Deborah looked at him with the expression of someone who had expected a different response. "I'll need to ask you to have a seat in the waiting area while I verify your account information. I'd prefer to speak with a manager at the counter," Marcus said. "I'm happy to wait here." Deborah's jaw tightened by a fraction. She pressed the intercom. What happened next happened quickly, and then slowly, and then all at once. A young woman named Kezia Odom had been standing 2 windows down, processing a routine withdrawal for an elderly man who came in every Tuesday at 10:15. Kezia was 26 years old, 8 months into her first full-time position at the branch, and she had been watching the exchange at Deborah's window since the moment Marcus placed his check on the counter. She had watched Deborah's posture change. She had watched the lobby go quiet. She had watched the security guard shift his weight without moving. Kezia knew what she was watching. She had seen it before, in different rooms, wearing different uniforms. The particular mechanics of a person being made to feel like a problem they had not created. She finished processing the elderly man's withdrawal, handed him his receipt, and then did something that was not in her job description and that she understood could cost her the position she had spent 8 months earning. She stepped away from her window, crossed the short distance to Deborah's station, and said quietly but clearly enough to be heard, "Deborah, I think Mr. Hale may have called ahead last Friday. Cynthia took the call. The notes might be in the system." Deborah looked at her. The look was not warm. "I'm handling this, Kezia." Kezia nodded and returned to her window, but she had said what she said. It was now in the air of the lobby. Marcus heard it, and he allowed himself one small private acknowledgement. Not a smile, not a nod, just a single breath held a half-second longer than the ones before it. The intercom crackled. Patricia Gould came through the back corridor with the brisk stride of someone who had resolved situations before and expected to resolve this one in under 3 minutes. She was wearing a dark blazer, a lanyard with her credentials, and an expression that had already rendered its verdict before she reached the counter. She looked at Marcus once, briefly, the way you look at something you have already categorized. "Sir," she said, "our tellers are trained to follow specific protocols for transactions of this nature. If you'll just take a seat, we can get this sorted out in a few minutes." "I'd prefer to resolve it here," Marcus said. "I called ahead on Friday. I spoke with Cynthia Reeves. She confirmed the deposit procedure and noted my account number. I have the time of that call if it's helpful." Patricia's expression did not shift. "We don't have a record of that call." "The record may be in the system," Marcus said. "Kezia mentioned it." Patricia glanced at Kezia. Kezia met her eyes without flinching. "Regardless," Patricia said, returning to Marcus, "a deposit of this size requires our standard review process. It's not a reflection on you personally. It's policy." She said the word policy the way people say it when they mean the conversation is over. Marcus reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and removed a single folded piece of paper, not the notes from Friday's call, not yet, and placed it on the counter beside the cashier's check. It was his account statement. 17 years of account history at what had been Cornerstone Savings and was now Meridian First Bank. The balance, visible at the top of the page, was $4,200,000. Patricia looked at it. The lobby was very quiet. Then Marcus reached into his jacket a second time and placed his business card on top of the statement. The card read, Marcus Hale, Principal. Hale Capital Group, LLC. Patricia picked up the card. She read it. She set it down. She looked at the account statement again, at the balance at the top of the page, then at the cashier's check, then at Marcus, and something moved through her face that she could not entirely control. Not embarrassment, not yet, but the first arriving edge of it, the moment before a person understands what they have done. She had no idea, not yet. The account number on that statement, the one Deborah had claimed she could not verify, the one Patricia had dismissed without pulling up, was attached to one of the largest individual accounts in the Buckhead branch's entire customer portfolio. It had been there for 17 years. It had survived the acquisition from Cornerstone Savings. It had been flagged in the branch's own internal records as a priority relationship account. And the branch director had just asked its owner to take a seat in the waiting area. The phone on Deborah's station rang. Patricia looked at the display. It was the branch's main line, routed from the regional office. She answered it. The color left her face in the time it takes to hear a name. Marcus stood at the counter, hands flat on the marble, and waited. The phone call lasted 4 minutes and 11 seconds. Patricia did not speak for most of it. She listened. Her free hand found the edge of the teller counter and rested there with the stillness of a person who has just understood that the floor beneath them is not what they believed it to be. When she finally spoke, she said only, "Yes, I understand. I'll take care of it immediately." Then she set the phone down with a care that looked like the last controlled thing she intended to do for the next several minutes. The lobby had not moved. The woman in the yellow coat had not returned to her deposit slip. The man in the blue tie had forgotten his phone entirely. The security guard near the door had both feet flat on the floor now, weight evenly distributed, as though he understood that whatever happened next required him to be present in a way the previous 10 minutes had not. Deborah stood at her station with her hands at her sides. Marcus stood at the counter with his hands flat on the marble. And the silence between them was not the same silence that had existed before. It had weight now. It had direction. Now, here's what that phone call contained, and why it arrived at exactly the moment it did. The regional vice president of Meridian First's Atlanta division was a man named Gerald Watkins. He was 58 years old, had spent 32 years in commercial banking, and had a reputation among branch directors as a man who did not raise his voice because he had never needed to. He was also one of 4 people in the Meridian First organization who knew, by name and by number, the accounts classified internally as priority relationship accounts. Accounts above a certain threshold, accounts with tenure, accounts that a regional bank in a competitive market could not afford to mishandle. Marcus Hale's account was one of 37 carrying that classification across all 42 Atlanta area branches. Gerald Watkins had not been watching the Buckhead branch for any particular reason that Tuesday. He had been reviewing the week's pending large transaction reports, a routine he maintained every Tuesday morning, when he saw a flag on a deposit attempt tied to one of those 37 accounts. The flag had been entered by Deborah Forsyth at 10:47. He recognized the account number. He had reviewed it during the Cornerstone acquisition 5 years earlier, had noted its tenure and balance, and had made a notation that the account should transition to the priority relationship tier without interruption. He picked up the phone within 90 seconds of seeing the flag. What Gerald Watkins said to Patricia in those 4 minutes and 11 seconds was not a reprimand. Not yet. It was information. Calm, precise, sequentially delivered. He told her who Marcus Hale was. He told her what the account represented to the branch. He told her what the priority relationship classification required in terms of service protocol. He told her that the cashier's check Marcus had presented was from a title company Meridian first had worked with on 17 transactions in the past 3 years alone. He told her, in the measured voice of a man who had no need to shout, that he would expect a full account of the morning's events by end of business. Patricia had said she understood. She did, fully, for the first time all morning. She turned back to the counter. Marcus had not moved. He was still standing with his hands flat on the marble, his breathing even, his expression carrying the composure of a man who has learned to let rooms come to their own conclusions at their own pace. He had not looked at his phone. He had not checked the time. He had not said a single word since asking Kezia to confirm the Friday call. "Mr. Hale," Patricia said. Her voice had lost its procedural certainty. "I owe you an apology." Marcus said nothing. He waited. "The account has been verified. The deposit will be processed today without a hold, and I would like to—" She stopped, started again. "I would like to speak with you privately, if you have a few minutes." "I have a few minutes," Marcus said. 6 words. They moved to Patricia's office. Kezia watched them go. She did not allow herself any visible expression, but her shoulders dropped by a fraction. The small physical release of a tension she had been holding since the moment she crossed the floor to Deborah's window and said the thing that was not in her job description. In the office, Patricia sat across from Marcus at her desk. The framed photograph of herself and Gerald Watkins was visible over her left shoulder. She did not appear to notice it. She had the account statement in front of her, the cashier's check, Marcus's business card, and 17 years of transaction history on her screen, a story she had not been interested in reading 40 minutes ago. "The call on Friday," Patricia said. "Cynthia's notes are in the system. I should have—" She stopped. "That should have been the first thing we checked." "It should have been," Marcus said. Not unkindly, factually. "How long have you been a customer here?" "Since it was Cornerstone Savings," Marcus said. 17 years. The room was very still. What Patricia Gould was experiencing in that moment was not simple embarrassment. It was the particular vertigo of a person who has operated for years with certainty about their own judgment and has just been shown, in the most concrete terms available, that the certainty was a construction. That the instincts she had praised in Deborah, the situational awareness she had underlined in a performance review, were not instincts at all. They were assumptions. And the assumptions had a shape. And the shape was not about the transactions. She knew it. Sitting across from Marcus Hale with his 17-year account history on her screen and his $840,000 check on her desk, she knew exactly what the shape was. She did not say so, but she knew. Marcus stood when the deposit was confirmed. He took his transaction receipt, folded it once along its center crease, and placed it in his jacket pocket beside the notes from Friday's call, the notes he had never needed to produce. He picked up his business card from the desk and returned it to his inside pocket. At the door, he paused. "The young woman at the second window," he said. "Kezia. She did her job well this morning." Patricia nodded. She said she would note it. Marcus walked back through the lobby. The woman in the yellow coat was gone. The man in the blue tie was gone. The security guard near the door held it open as Marcus approached. A small gesture, unrequested, offered without ceremony. Marcus thanked him by name, having read the guard's badge on the way in, a habit, and stepped out into the September morning. The air smelled of car exhaust and the particular warmth of Atlanta in early fall, the kind of warmth that carries the memory of summer without its full weight. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment. Not long, just long enough to breathe. Then he walked to his car and drove back to the office. What happened after he left the building was not something he orchestrated. It was not something he requested. It was the consequence of a system doing, slowly and imperfectly, the thing it was supposed to do. Gerald Watkins received Patricia's end-of-business report at 4:53 that afternoon. He read it in its entirety, Deborah's account of the morning, accurate in its facts and careful in its framing. Keziah's name, noted in a single sentence as having directed attention to the Friday call log. Patricia's account of her own actions, more honest than he had expected and less complete than it needed to be. He forwarded the report to Meridian First's Compliance and Human Resources Division with a single line of annotation. Priority relationship account, 17-year customer, deposit of $840,000 delayed without cause. Full review required. The review began the following morning. It was conducted by a woman named Sandra Okafor, Meridian First's Senior Compliance Officer for the Southeast region. Sandra was 49 years old, methodical in the way that only people who have seen institutions protect themselves at the expense of individuals learn to be methodical. She had been in her role for 11 years. She did not begin with conclusions. She began with the transaction log, the call notes, the flag entry, the timestamp sequence, and the account classification record. She finished the review in 2 days. Her findings were precise. The account had been correctly classified as a priority relationship account since the Cornerstone acquisition. The Friday call notes existed in the system and had been accessible to any teller or branch director who pulled the account before flagging the transaction. The flag had been entered without pulling the account. The branch director had arrived at the counter without pulling the account. The deposit had been delayed 41 minutes without procedural justification. The customer had been asked twice to leave the counter and wait in the designated area, a request that had no basis in the branch's written large deposit protocol. Sandra's report did not use the word discrimination. It did not need to. The timeline spoke in a language that required no translation. She submitted the report to Meridian First's regional leadership and legal department on a Thursday morning. By Friday afternoon, the legal department had placed a litigation hold on all records related to the account and the branch's operations for the preceding 18 months. Someone in the legal department had looked at Sandra's timeline, looked at the account classification, looked at the 17-year tenure, looked at the balance, and understood with the clarity of professional experience what a plaintiff's attorney would do with those facts in a room where 12 people were asked to decide what they meant. The litigation hold was the first stone. The second came from a direction no one in the branch had anticipated. The logistics company that purchased Marcus's building on Peachtree Industrial Boulevard was a subsidiary of a larger commercial real estate investment group that maintained its primary banking relationship with Meridian First's commercial division. The closing had been handled in part by a Meridian First commercial loan officer named David Park, who had met Marcus 3 times over the course of the deal and described him, in the notes of those meetings, as one of the most prepared and disciplined commercial clients he had worked with in 15 years. David Park heard about the Tuesday morning incident from a colleague on Wednesday, not from Marcus, but the way information moves through a building when something has gone wrong and the walls are thin, in fragments, in the break room, in the particular silence that falls when someone says a name in a context that surprises the room. He sent an email to Gerald Watkins that afternoon. 3 sentences. He said he had worked with Marcus Hale on a significant commercial transaction, considered him a priority client relationship for the commercial division, and wanted it on record that the Tuesday incident was inconsistent with every professional interaction he had observed. Gerald Watkins read the email and added it to the file. The file was growing, not with noise, not with drama, but with the steady accumulation of documented fact that eventually reaches a weight no single manager can redirect. Deborah Forsyth was placed on administrative leave pending the review's completion. She was not at Window 3 on Wednesday morning, and her absence was noticed by everyone who had been in the lobby on Tuesday. Patricia Gould was called to a meeting with Gerald Watkins and a representative from Human Resources on the Friday of that week. The meeting lasted 1 hour and 20 minutes. What was said in that room was not recorded in any document that became public. But Patricia returned to her office afterward and sat at her desk for a long time without moving. She did not attend the branch's weekly staff meeting the following Monday. She submitted her resignation 11 days later. The reckoning, when it came, did not arrive with anger. It did not arrive with revenge. It arrived the way institutional consequence always arrives when the record is clear and the stakes are real, quietly, procedurally, and with the particular finality of a door closing in a hallway where no one is watching. Marcus Hale did not attend any of those meetings. He had been contacted by Meridian First's legal department and had responded through his own attorney, a woman named Carolyn Briggs, who had represented him on 3 commercial transactions, and who had, upon hearing the facts of Tuesday morning, used the word actionable in a tone that left very little ambiguity about what she meant. He had let the work speak, exactly as Estelle had told him. Carolyn Briggs filed the complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau on a Monday morning, 14 days after the Tuesday in September. The filing was 41 pages. It contained the transaction log, the call notes, the flag entry, the timestamp sequence, the account classification record, Sandra Okafor's compliance review, David Park's 3-sentence email, and the account history going back 17 years to the days when the branch had been called Cornerstone Savings, and the lobby had not yet been fitted with brushed steel and ambient lighting that made everyone look slightly suspicious. 41 pages, every fact in sequence, every timestamp accounted for. Carolyn had also sent a courtesy copy to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's business desk, not to a reporter, but to the editor, a man she had worked with on a story 3 years prior and trusted to understand what was and was not a matter of public interest. She did not ask him to publish anything. She simply sent the filing and let him read it. He read it the same afternoon. The story ran on a Thursday. Business section, above the fold, under a headline that was precise and did not editorialize. It named the bank. It named the branch. It named the account tenure, the balance, and the amount of the cashier's check. It named Marcus Hale, principal of Hale Capital Group, LLC, and described in the measured language of a journalist who understood that the facts required no amplification what had happened to him on a Tuesday morning in September when he walked into a bank where he'd kept an account for 17 years and tried to deposit a check for $840,000. The story named no one else by name. It did not need to. By Friday morning, 4 national outlets had picked it up. By Friday afternoon, Meridian First's communications department had issued a statement expressing the bank's commitment to equitable service and its zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory treatment, announcing that an internal review had been conducted and that appropriate personnel actions had been taken. It did not specify what those actions were. It did not need to. The personnel actions were already a matter of internal record, and the internal record had a way of becoming external when a litigation hold was in place and discovery was a possibility that no one in the legal department was dismissing. Deborah Forsyth's employment with Meridian First ended the week Sandra Okafor submitted her compliance report. The process had required its steps, and the steps had been followed, and at the end of them the outcome was what the timeline had always pointed toward. She signed the separation agreement and left the building on a Wednesday morning with a box that was not heavy. Patricia Gould's resignation had been accepted. The framed photograph of herself and Gerald Watkins at the performance banquet was not in the box she carried out. It remained on the desk for the interim branch director, who arrived the following week. A woman named Renata Flores, who had managed the Decatur location for 6 years and who, on her first morning at the Buckhead branch, pulled up the priority relationship account list and read every name on it before she did anything else. That was the first systemic change. Small, quiet, but real. The second was institutional. Meridian First's compliance division, under Sandra Okafor's direction, revised the large deposit protocol for all 42 Atlanta area branches. The revision required that any account flagged for additional verification be pulled in the system before the flag was entered, that priority relationship accounts be identified at the point of transaction initiation, and that any call-ahead notes be confirmed before a customer was asked to leave the service counter. The revision was distributed on a Tuesday. Exactly 3 weeks after the Tuesday that had made it necessary. The settlement itself was reached 6 weeks after Carolyn filed. The terms were confidential. What was not confidential was that the settlement existed, and that Meridian First had reached it, and that the reaching of it had been noted by every regional bank in the Atlanta market that employed a compliance officer who read the trade publications. Memory in institutions is a form of policy, and the memory of what had happened in the Buckhead branch on a Tuesday morning in September was now in the record, in a way that would not be easily removed. Kezia Odom received a call from Renata Flores on the Friday after the story ran. Renata told her that her actions on Tuesday morning had been reviewed as part of the compliance process and noted in the record as consistent with the bank's stated service standards. A formal commendation had been added to her personnel file. Her name had been mentioned specifically in Gerald Watkins's communication to the Compliance Division as an example of the kind of judgment the branch should have exercised from the beginning. Kezia said, "Thank you." Her voice was steady. She was 26 years old, 8 months into her first full-time position, and she had crossed a floor and said a thing that was not in her job description and that she had understood, and the moment she said it, could cost her everything she had spent 8 months building. It had not cost her anything. It had returned something instead. Not a reward she had calculated, but the particular vindication of a person who has done the right thing in a room full of people who chose not to, and who has been seen doing it. She did not speak to Marcus directly until 3 months later. He came into the branch on a Wednesday to process a routine transaction, approached her station specifically, said her name, and thanked her. He said she had done her job well. He said it the same way he had said it to Patricia Gould on the morning of the deposit, factually, without ceremony, as though it were simply a true thing that deserved to be stated. Kezia nodded. She said she had only said what she knew. "That's all it ever takes," Marcus said. 4 words. He drove home that evening on the same roads he had driven for 30 years, through neighborhoods that had changed and neighborhoods that had not, past the industrial corridor where the warehouse he had sold in 2018 used to stand, past the East Point duplex he still owned, past the community credit union in southwest Atlanta, where he had spent 11 years learning everything he knew before he knew enough to use it. He drove to a house in Cascade Heights that was not large and was not designed to announce anything. He had bought it in 2003. He had never moved. The garden in the back was his grandmother Estelle's design, transplanted from her memory and his hands. The same herbs, the same arrangement, the same clay pots she had kept on her porch in Macon until the year she died. He sat on the back steps for a while in the October evening. The air had finally turned. The warmth of September had given way to the first real cool of fall, the kind of air that carries the smell of dry leaves and the particular stillness of a season completing itself. He thought about Estelle. He thought about her hands flat on the kitchen table. He thought about the words she had pressed into him at 14 years old, the words he had written in the inside cover of every journal since, the words that had been true in every room that had tested him and in every room that had tried to diminish him and in every room where he had stood with his hands flat on the counter and waited for the world to catch up to what he had already built. Stay low, build high, and let the work speak when you're ready for it to be heard. He had not been ready to be heard that Tuesday morning. He had simply walked into a bank to make a deposit, but the work had spoken anyway. It had spoken in timestamps and account balances and 17 years of transaction history and a compliance officer's 41-page report and a journalist's headline above the fold and a revised protocol distributed to 42 branches on a Tuesday 3 weeks later. The work had spoken, as it always does, eventually, for the people who build it in silence. Now, here is what I want you to sit with. Marcus Hale never raised his voice. He never lost his composure. He never reached for the notes from Friday's call until the room had already come to its own conclusion. He walked into that bank as a man who had spent 30 years building something extraordinary in near total silence, and he walked out the same way, and the consequence that followed was not his anger and not his revenge. It was simply the record, clear, complete, and finally visible. This happens every day, in bank lobbies and hotel lobbies and conference rooms and parking lots and 1,000 other places where someone decides, in a fraction of a second, what a person is worth before they have read a single line of the account. And most of the time there is no Keziah who crosses the floor. Most of the time the lobby stays quiet, and the crowd looks away, and the person at the counter has to decide, alone, how long they are willing to stand there. Marcus stood there. He did not move, and the room had to come to him. If you have ever been in that room, on either side of that counter, drop a comment. I want to hear what you saw, and what you did, and what you wish you had done. Every week on this channel, we find the people the world overlooked and tell their stories the way they deserve to be told. If that matters to you, like this one and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe because the next story is already waiting.